and the changing nature, really, of Passover and Easter and these holidays on our family systems as boomers age and our parents. And I want to remind you that if you know the answer to our sports trivia question, the question on May 4th, 2000, the Philadelphia Flyers beat the Pittsburgh Penguins in a playoff game that went 5 overtimes. Who scored that game-winning goal for the Flyers? And you can win gift certificates to Short Hills Deli in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. We want to remind you that the following portion, this next half hour of Boomer Generation Radio, is brought to you by the Kendal Corporation. Kendal is a system of not-for-profit communities and services located in 8 states in the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, and the near Midwest regions of the United States. Kendal advocates for and empowers older adults to reach their full potential, and is committed to working with others to together transform the experience of aging. And to learn more about Kendal, that's Kendal, we invite you to visit kendal.org or call toll-free at 888-759-0128. That's 888-759-0128. We're back with our panel, Eloise Scott, Second Baptist Church here in Germantown, and a pastoral psychologist and therapist, Cheryl Wade, another associate pastor at Second Baptist Church, and Rabbi Eric Goldberg of Shirami in Bucks County. Ladies and gentlemen, how do we begin to handle the celebration of these holidays in nursing homes when people may be very, very lonely and isolated, when there is no family that they may not be able to get out? What are some of the challenges to make these festivals and holidays relevant to people who maybe just cut off from everything else?
I want to start by saying that I've had a change of perspective around nursing homes in many occasions. As a younger person and as a pastor in visiting in nursing homes, I found them very alienating. And if you ask me today, would I hope to spend my last days there? Probably not. At the same time, people build communities in nursing homes. So even though when I go there, I don't know the people who are staffing that day, and I don't know who's down the hall and maybe is a friend of the person I'm visiting, there is a growing understanding that I have that there is community that is built there. So I think we shouldn't assume there is no meaning among the people who are gathered there. At the same time, I think the religious tradition has an opportunity and even a responsibility to remember those people who are in these settings at particular times of the year when family is highlighted. So that sense of loss might be greater. So I think it's both and.
Mm-hmm. Does it, in your experience, in both traditions, when we're talking about growing older and facing mortality, how important is it, or how much have you been involved with families who've said, we don't want to wait till the last minute to do anything. We want to sit down and have a conversation with our loved one about making some significant plans if down the road we have to make certain types of decisions. Is this, I know that there's a movement, and some of us in this panel have been involved in that movement, but are you seeing in the pews, in the trenches, an awareness of this growing, or is this still something we just repress and we don't want to deal with?
I believe we still keep it at arm's length. Mm-hmm. I think there's a conflict between the broader culture, the secular culture, about, we can have a facelift and we can change our clothes, our apparel, we can get a new car, we can do a wonderful house, we can do all these things that will stave off my aging, my mortality, even my death. And so I think it's become more difficult. For example, I'm dealing with that now, where the person, even though she knew about the paperwork, the powers of attorney, the estates, and the kinds of things that one would have at the end of life in terms of documents, she did not do them, and she knew that better. But I wonder now, why? Why are you keeping it at arm's length when we know we're mortal? So I think it's the conflict from the culture, as well as, well, if I don't think about it, it will just go away.
So I know that right now that there is a movement afoot in the United States, and I think tomorrow, today's the 15th, so tomorrow is something called National Healthcare Decision Day, which is we had the gentleman who started this on the program a year ago, and we have a caller, I think, who wants to chime in on this. Anyway, Evan, are you there?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me on.
Hi, Evan. You're representing, if I'm not mistaken, you're from New Jersey and involved with Compassion and Choices, right?
Correct, yep.
And we just got into this conversation here with our panel on the importance of having a conversation with family members, especially around this particular period of time. You know, we've been talking a lot, Easter, Passover, families are coming together. And
Correct.
This may be a perfect time for the conversation. What are we talking about, Evan? What kind of conversation?
Right, so in New Jersey, about 3 out of 4 people do not have an advance directive.
Mm-hmm.
So this would be a great time, if you do have an advance directive, to speak to your family about what's in it. And if not, maybe speaking to your family about what you're thinking about putting in your advance directive, and also just general end-of-life plans. The more we can think about this stuff when we're healthy and when we're really, truly competent, the easier the decisions are for the family members and for yourself when we're put in these positions that we know we eventually will be in. Everyone, will eventually be at the end of their life. So the more we can plan for it early on, the better for yourself and for your family.
So I have to ask you this question, and we have a panel of experts here. How in the world, you're sitting at the Easter dinner table on Sunday afternoon, or you're sitting at the Passover Seder, how do you gently introduce, okay, now we're going to have a conversation about grandpa, dad, mom, grandmom. Let's have a conversation about what you would like to have done at the end of your life. And could you pass the potatoes, please? How do you, I'm serious, because how do you introduce this conversation? Because I know this is a real challenge for a lot of people.
Right. I mean, I would start with something specific. So maybe talking about a specific proxy. So if you have decided you want one person to be your proxy, you can talk about that and the sort of directions that you've given them. I would start with anything specific, but it's a difficult conversation to have, which is why we're talking about it now. It's certainly never going to be the easiest thing, but it's always better to do it now than when it's too late and you're already in a difficult position.
Yeah, Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I just was going to ask, especially in light of that type of conversation,
right,
when we're in situations both during Passover and Easter when a lot of family is around, what if there are people in the family who don't like the answer that the person gives, right? You're sitting around the table, and just to use an example with my family, I have a brother. What if my parents said, we want your brother to be the proxy and you, Eric, not to be involved? I mean, that's a really, those are harder family conversations to have.
That's a very good, I guess you have to pick your spots. Go ahead, Cheryl.
I think timing is everything. In my view, the celebrative table is not the best time to do this kind of work. I think you might hope that the elders would be willing to say, we've done some thinking about that, and we're going to get back to you each on what we're thinking, so that you can at least signal there's something coming. I do think it's more likely that elders will introduce those subjects. I think we become more fearless about those things often as we age and more realistic. So I think we have our greatest hope in our elders, and I'm rapidly becoming one of them, making these decisions and being the leader that we need to be in our families. For instance, we can decide how we want our remains to be handled, and we can decide who will do that. And those sorts of decisions began to open up the conversation to some of the things that maybe are a little trickier than who is going to handle the remains.
Yeah, Scotty?
One of the things that's happened in my own family is when someone dies or someone is ill, that's when the conversation occurs.
Right.
Because the person who's ill or the person who has died, his or her family is dealing with whatever that is. And we say, no, I don't want that for me. What do you want? Because you haven't said anything. Or I would prefer that you do this, or this is how I want my remains handled. And so my experience has been in my own family that when we encounter a loved one who is ill or dying or has just died, the conversation is ripe at that point in time.
And if I could add just one other thing, you just reminded me when you were talking about kind of how things are handled, especially with the body itself at the end of life. There's other challenges that arise from when religious kind of, not just traditions, but religious expectations and laws come into conflict perhaps with what someone is trying to wish for. So, for example, in Jewish tradition, the idea of cremation is something you're not allowed to do it from a Jewish legal perspective. And on the other hand, also from the Torah, we're commanded to honor our parents. So the question is, if my mother or father said, this is what I want, am I supposed to say to them, no? Judaism says you shouldn't do it. And so I think there's all these types of, when, let's say, two different really important values or ethics or commandments come into
Well, I think this is a
conflict with
part of the
each other.
generational change that we were talking about earlier, the fact that there are differences of opinions. I think we've all run across this, where our parent or loved one will make a decision that really is contrary to what we may think. And every time I've been in that situation, I've always counseled people saying, look, you may disagree with this from your perspective, but in our tradition, that fifth commandment of honoring and respecting, you're duty bound to honor those that loved one's wishes, even though you may literally not agree with it. And it sometimes is part of the pastoral counseling mode to really step in at that moment and try to do some very, very powerful teaching. And that relationship, generational, using the text, obviously. But I see this coming up a lot. Evan, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Anyway, thank you for the call, because you just prompted some really good conversation. And the whole idea of having that conversation and how to get it started, thank you very much. And with Compassion and Choices, I think they have some tips on how to do this, correct, on your website?
Yeah, and we also have information about advanced directives. A lot of great info. Generally, in terms of filling out advanced directives, we like to say that there's two parts of it. The first is deciding what you want. We have tools to help you do that. And then the second part is communicating that to your medical professionals and your family. And we also have tools for that.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it, Evan. Thank you very much. You take care of yourself.
You.
Thanks for calling in.
Thank you.
Can I just add one other thing that reminded me of that same challenge? There's two different ways, kind of handling two different, whatever you want to call it, facets to that conversation, which is one is from a family perspective, but again, from a clergy perspective, I can remember this call as clear as day. A couple of years ago, over the summer, I was in my office. I received a phone call from somebody who was not a member of the congregation, but was in our community and just had a question for a rabbi, which was, by his own admission, I'm coming to the end of my life. Mm-hmm. I want to know, according to Jewish law, I understand that I cannot be cremated. My wife was cremated. I want to be cremated. Am I a bad Jew for doing it? Right? So there's these challenges also of, like, on a larger religious level, what I do want to honor this person. I never met them before and never talked to them after, but the question is, like, how do you honor people, which you want to do? And at the same time, in that particular case, from a Jewish perspective, there's not too many answers other than, from a Jewish legal perspective, there's not too many other answers than, no, you can't really do that. I don't know if that makes you a bad Jew or not, but I think these are the very challenging
with the increasing
questions.
Number of people who are cremated, because we're seeing that more and more and more and more. You don't. It's obviously not a time to do value judgments if you're a good person or a bad person.
No, right. And it's, you could do that with any, let's call it commandment, any mitzvah, whatever it happens to be. But I think it gets back to what we were talking about a little bit before about, let's call it the moving away from religion, moving away from towards the secular side of things. And I think that for a lot of people, that, for me, I don't literally say to that person, you're a bad Jew, or I wouldn't say, to someone, you're a bad Christian or whatever it happens to be. I think the challenge is just how do I, as a rabbi, hold on to saying these are things that are important to Jewish history, value, law, etc.
Correct.
And at the same time, honor that
Leave
person.
the door open.
Right.
Cheryl?
I think it's also a wonderful opportunity to ask people to think theologically, and we don't have to use those terms, but that is what we're asking them to take this opportunity to think about why they want to do it this way and what their faith perspective is on that, and maybe we can offer some perspective on that, because clearly how we interpret our texts do change. And that's a wonderful moment to begin that conversation.
There's also one other piece, and I think we need to bear this in mind, and that's resources. What I have experienced now is the families that have the resources to do whatever, and I'm hearing, because I haven't had a very recent experience with it, but I'm hearing funerals cost a lot more. All the things that go traditionally with a funeral
Correct.
and with a burial.
Correct.
And there are no resources to do this, particularly in the Christian tradition. So and apparently cremation is more economical.
It is, and I've had this conversation with numbers of funeral directors, and the difference of the economic differences is substantial. It's very, very substantial. And that does go into it in this day and age, part of those decisions. This is a reminder that this portion of Boomer Generation Radio is brought to you by Kendal Outreach, serving the field of aging by raising public awareness and advocacy around important issues of older adults. Through education, training, and implementation of comprehensive approaches to safe, individualized, long-term care practices, Kendal Outreach has been sharing Kendal's approach to quality care with consumers, advocates, providers, government agencies, and related organizations since 1989. To learn more, visit kendal.org. That's KENDAL.org, and click on the icon Outreach. That's Kendal Outreach. Very, very proud sponsor of Boomer Generation Radio and this segment of Boomer Generation Radio. Before we start running out of time, which, believe it or not, we are about to, I want to return to one other metaphor or theological or idea of that of suffering. And we're talking about, we just had this conversation a little bit about preparing for the end of life, and one of the questions that always comes up of fears of people of at the end of life and is I don't want to suffer, I don't want to be in pain. There's a certain segment of a motif within both of these traditions, the slavery imagery of Egypt and the Seder, the suffering and the passion of Jesus on the cross. How do we deal in this contemporary, increasingly secular movement away from traditional faith, changing in all the family traditions, all the issues that you've discussed? How do we justify this? Are there reasons for it? How do we deal with it when our counseling situations with families about the issue of pain and suffering? Is there a reason for this, or is this just part of the gamble of our being human? So, somebody. It's a light question for the last 10 minutes.
I'll just say this, and I think it's one of the challenges of God from a Jewish perspective. You were talking about speaking theologically earlier. From a Jewish perspective, there's the belief that no matter what we can think about God, God is more than that. And so it's hard for kids to understand that. It's hard for adults to understand that. And so I think the big question in this regard is, on a certain level, what is God's involvement in perhaps someone's pain or suffering? And within Judaism, there's a wide spectrum of ideas there. There's some people who say God is not involved in the world. There's other people who say God's involved in every moment of every day. And I think one of the real things on a clergy level, on a pastoral level, is really to kind of talk with people going through those challenging situations, whether it's they themselves who are either currently suffering or thinking about their future or have a family member who's doing the same, and kind of really open up, like you said, that dialogue to talk about God and to talk about why things happen in our lives.
And I think part of what we're asking is whether or not suffering has any meaning, or is it just meaningless? From a theological perspective, I think it does have meaning. I don't see it as God planning for all of us to have suffering. I think it's pretty much in the nature of being human, that we do have suffering. I think if we think about the experience of Jesus, which is where many Christians would start, clearly suffering had meaning for him. So I think part of what we're trying to do is help people who are suffering understand the meaning in that for them. I think it often makes us infinitely more compassionate than we ever were before, much more understanding that we're part of the human race. We can't get out of it by being so wealthy or so smart or so capable. We're part of the human race. So I think those are some starting points for me as a pastor around suffering.
Right.
Yes.
I would just add one other thing, and I think one of the challenges, again, is in a situation where someone has lived a long life, sometimes talking about pain and suffering is one type of thing. But then I think of my friends who are in Chicago who just lost their 8-year-old to cancer, and you say, what did that kid ever do to, to have what meaning could there be in that suffering? So I think also, let's call it age and stage of life has something to do with it as well.
But I also think that part of it is, as human beings, we are oriented toward, oh no, we should never suffer. Because we're afraid of it, as you had mentioned before, because we don't know why, because sometimes we can't figure out any meaning for the suffering. And I think as mortals, we think we should know. We should know why we're suffering. We should have some idea.
And what's interesting, we were talking about kind of people finding their way back to religion, let's call it, in certain cases. And I think that's also one of the times when people are suffering, even if they don't particularly talk about God or whatever it may be, one of the questions they ask, am I suffering because I did something wrong? That God's seeing me do something
it's
wrong.
The book of Job. It's
right?
the book of Job and the friends. You must have done something wrong. This whole idea of meaning in the couple of minutes we have left, I'm fascinated by it increasingly because not only is it's steeped in some of the writings of our tradition, but the understanding and all the work that I do with baby boomers and as we process through our own aging, this desire really to have some sense of my life has to have some meaning. I may have acquired some things. My children may be grown. Could you talk to me a little bit about your experience about what you're seeing, this push, this power, this demand that my life stand for something, that I'm not just some sort of cosmic accident?
I think it comes about in your heart and spirit that somehow is satisfying or brings about some contentment that you feel that, oh, God is in this because I feel this so deeply. And I think that's for most of us, but I also think that a lot of people come to that over a period of time, over the course of their life, and say, oh, it was to raise wonderful, beautiful children, or was to do something for hunger or education. And I think it's a maturation process. I don't think all of us really know. And if we say we have the meaning, is that so?
Right.
We don't know.
And I also think, getting back to something we were talking about at the beginning, is that I think a lot fewer people are saying, how am I going to change the world, right? Like, say, a Mother Teresa type, versus did I leave my family in a better spot than when I came onto the earth? I think it's less global and more narrow in focus.
I do think it's in our DNA to ask about meaning as a sentient being. It's got to be more than just what we got up and ate this morning. And so I think as we seek that meaning, when you look at the life development process, even before we get to those last days, we're asking those meaningful questions often as we become mentors to the next generation. So I think it's a process rather than a certain eureka moment that gives us the meaning in our lives. And I think more and more people are understanding that even though you can't do everything and you might not be Mother Teresa, we can all do something. And what is that something we're going to do that makes our journey here having meant something?
Yeah, I think that the whole idea of, I think when we start understanding that our own, and looking in that mirror and trying to figure out who that person is looking back at us and where they came from, something clicks on in some deep psycho-spiritual level that it makes us begin to understand that we do have a responsibility to give something back and what we want to leave behind. There's a phrase I heard somebody tell me once that, the Brinks truck never follows the hearse. And it's which I always loved. It's a great expression, but it's really that type of giving back to our families. And so many times we do funerals, and it's that legacy to that next generation that is most powerfully remembered. This portion of Boomer Generation Radio has been brought to you by Kendal, a system of not-for-profit communities and services that advocates for and empowers older adults to reach their full potential. And together we are transforming the experience of aging. And to learn more about Kendal, that's Kendal, visit kendal.org, or again, toll-free at 888-759-0128. That's 888-759-0128. We've been talking this morning, a very lovely conversation. I want to thank you very much to our three distinguished guests, Rabbi Eric Goldberg of Shirami up in Bucks County, Cheryl Wade, Associate Pastor at the Second Baptist Church here in Germantown, and Eloise Scott, another Associate Pastor at the Second Baptist Church in Germantown, and a pastoral psychologist and therapist. We have about a minute left, I think, if what Tony is telling me is correct, and a little bit more than a minute. Just one quick round. What's your best wish for your people, for your family, for your congregation on this very interesting week of Passover and Easter?
I guess it's to go inside, meaning inside yourself, and think about what is the meaning of this for me and for my life.
For me, it would be to appropriate the transforming power of this holiday that we're experiencing, this resurrection, so that it's not just about what we hope happens sometime in the future, but how will my life be different tomorrow, because somehow the reality of the resurrection is in my spirit.
At the end of the Seder, we say L'Shana Haba'ah B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. And it's my hope for all of us that we get the chance to go to Israel sometime during this next 365 days and get to experience all of the wonderful things that Israel has to offer.
So, Eloise, Cheryl, and Eric, thank you very much for coming in and having this conversation about these two wonderful and very, very powerful festivals in both of our traditions, and in many ways how much they share on a very deep, personal, psychological level, to allow us, hopefully, through this process, to talk to each other, to talk to our families, and to talk to ourselves. So thank you very much for joining us. To all of you, have a wonderful day. Great holiday season to everyone, and we look forward to see you again next Tuesday on Boomer Generation Radio here in WWDB AM 860 here in Philadelphia. Thank you, Tony.